Richard, we're here to talk about local churches and making them friendly for disabled people to be able to use. We're outside the British Union office, but this could be any church. Tell me, we're outside the door. What's going to get you inside?
Well, obviously level or ramped entrance and a sufficiently wide door, that's important. But remember that disabled people just aren't in wheelchairs. Think about visually impaired people, people with hearing impairments. And if your church caters for people with different needs, and I very much hope it will, then you can put symbols on your wayside pulpit or have some information that's available to people and share this information with others.
What's the biggest problem you find when you go visiting churches and you're here, you're outside? What's your biggest need, your biggest difficulty?
Well, let's start at the beginning, and somewhere to park is obviously helpful because I travel around in my vehicle and then from my vehicle in my wheelchair on the pavement. So if there's designated disabled persons parking, that helps, or if some area could be coned off, that's obviously very helpful. And I think, again, then logically progress towards the front of the church and through the church. But obviously, whilst it's wonderful to be able to attend church and either Sabbath school or the family service or both, some comfort break might be appropriate, and wheelchair accessible toilets obviously very important.
Okay, we'll take a look at that when we get inside. Ramps, is that an issue? Because a lot of churches it steps up to the front door. I mean, that's the way they were designed back in years gone by. How do we overcome that problem?
Well, there are various ways. I mean, obviously there's a straight ramp we can adopt if there's sufficient depth at the front of the church, because really we should be looking for a maximum gradient of 1 in 12. But if that isn't possible, then think either of a cross ramp, what we might call a zigzag ramp, and that can still achieve the same gradient, but in a shorter space from the church to the, say, front gate. If that's still not possible, then think perhaps of a side entrance or some other entrance. If you're still struggling, then does there need to be some sort of platform lift outside? And yes, unfortunately, cost is...
I can see those pound signs just mounting up.
Sure.
But that will get us in. Let's go inside and see what we need to do in there.
Okay.
We've made our way in the door, we've looked at the notice boards, we're into the actual church, maybe the sanctuary itself. Mm-hmm. In this building, we're outside the boardroom. There's a sign up there that says induction loop. Is that good news to you?
It's very welcome news, I'm sure, for anyone with a hearing impairment. And, this is important in as much as we don't just simply become transfixed upon wheelchair users and recognise other people's needs. And feel free to discuss people's needs with them. I don't think we really feel embarrassed about that, but usually quite happy to share with an interested party or individual the improvements that could be made and what would most facilitate us to participate in worship.
Now, you're using that word to share, and I'm wondering, as you come into church, and particularly maybe if you're visiting somewhere that you're unfamiliar with, people aren't used to seeing you, don't know who you are, do they need to approach you maybe in a different way than they do an able-bodied person? Are there any helpful rules?
Well, I would say first and foremost, be yourself and do what you normally do greet a disabled person, if you can, in the way that you greet any other person coming into your church. I know some people might come down perhaps to my level, and if people are comfortable with that, that's fine. But otherwise, if it's just a short welcome and hello rather than a lengthy discussion, then remain standing if you feel more comfortable with that. And I think what often is the case that we don't like to make too much fuss and be a focus of intention. And if people are starting to move a whole row of chairs out of the way in the sanctuary so we can be somewhere, I'm not really keen on that sort of thing and disrupting a sermon or a prayer, certainly.
You don't want to make a scene, but you want to be warmly welcomed and comfortable.
Yeah, and I think you'll find most people, if they come into church a little bit late, they just like to quietly sit at the back. And I'm not saying disabled people are always late, but don't disrupt the whole proceedings, don't disrupt the whole church. I'm sure as time progresses we can accommodate more appropriate positions or changes, and let's just make a comfortable, pleasant start and welcome people. That's the most thing, make them feel welcome.
But of course timing can be an issue that we need to be aware of, because you may have a driver that drops you at church and comes to pick you up at a certain time, and if the service always overruns and you're up at the front and the driver's got to walk all the way up the aisle, so there is some need for compromise, for working things out in that kind of direction.
Sure, perhaps so, but I think there's some responsibility on the disabled person to say, look, I'd rather be at the back because I might need to get away a little bit earlier, or to obtain some information that lets them know what time the service is likely to finish. I mean, just talk, there's not a problem with that. And I think, again, be careful how you assist a disabled person. If you're touching my wheelchair, you're touching me. And, whilst that's quite welcome in some instances, in others it can feel a little bit imposing. And I think, same again, if you have someone there who might have a visual impairment, who might even have a guide dog with them, don't pull their arm. Let them take your elbow, and that's the way that you usually assist a person with a visual impairment. But also, if they do have a guide dog with them, remember that dog's working. Don't fuss it, don't pet it. Whilst I'm sure children will all want to love and pet it, if that person gives you permission to do that, then fine. But when the dog has the harness on, it's working.
It's working.
Not playing. When the harness is off, not so bad. But always ask the permission. I know children in church love seeing all the buttons on my wheelchair and all the switches, and very tempting they are to them as well. But
you don't know what James Bond functions they may have.
Absolutely.
Now, there's another important issue that we really don't like to talk about, but churches and toilets. We've got a disabled toilet down the corridor here on the left, and you tell me it's done all right. There could be an improvement on the lock on the door, but you could get in there, turn around, swing the chair.
Well, let me tell you, you have a disabled person's toilet there, and that's terminology that people often misuse. Why would I want to use a disabled toilet? I want to use an enabling toilet on the same disabled person's parking. But no, joking apart, that's a good size toilet, and that's the main emphasis. Start with the right space. The building regulation guidelines, often the minimum requirements that are needed, and all too often architects and planners regard these as the maximum. They're not. There's nothing to say you can't go larger. And whilst they talk of a maximum 12-inch gradient, 1 in 12 gradient for a ramp, there's nothing to stop you doing a 1 in 15. The door width is great, no problem. If you wanted to go slightly wider, no problem. But again, consult with disabled people. If you say, well, there aren't any disabled people in our church, there must be disabled people in your community. There are probably local groups of disabled people, awareness groups, charitable groups, disablement information and advice lines, independent living centres. Use these. They'll be very pleased to help. There might even be an access officer located within the local council, and this is part of their job, and I think it actually could open doors in other ways. So even if you think you know it all, go and check, make some friends, and next thing you know, when these adaptations are done, that you could invite people.
More people could come in.
Absolutely.
So I think the final part of our short discussion today is you're an active member of the church. You're a very happy Seventh-day Adventist. Are there ways to make it easier for you to participate in worship? I mean, one of your practical difficulties is you can't get up on the platform.
Sure.
But if you want to take a leadership responsibility, lead out in the praise and worship, or preach, or whatever you feel called to do, are there ways to make it easier for somebody like you?
I think flexibility is a key issue here. What we do at Chester Green Church is I simply go in front of the platform, so I have a wireless microphone, and so I can still participate in our services, our family services, and enjoy praise time and choose the hymns I particularly want to sing and would like our congregation to hear. So there's plenty of scope for participation, and there's plenty of scope also in other activities in the church. It's not just about Sabbath school and family worship. We obviously have a lot of committees to help assist in the running of the church. And looking at the times and schedules of these can be helpful. And I think sometimes trying to arrive at a consensus of a time that's accommodating everyone as much as possible. We might not be always able to accommodate everyone precisely the time or day that they prefer. But I think, again, to the credit of Chester Green board members, there was an issue that was difficult for them to, I think, initially respond to, and that was my increasing need to have an assistant with me at a board meeting to help me with my papers, to help obviously move my limbs if it became a little uncomfortable, to pass me a glass to have a drink. And some people might be saying, well, why couldn't some of the other board members do that? And they would do that, but for me, two issues. One is I was imposing on some of their time and their attention to what they were trying to manage, whether it's their own paperwork, their own note-taking, or indeed focusing on the issues in hand. But also the fact that, I have an assistant who's familiar with my needs and the language I use to describe what needs to be done, and it becomes something intimate between two people. And this was becoming a little bit of an issue, and as I say, to the credit of the board, the compromise we reached was that if we come across to some confidential issue, then my assistant will withdraw from the meeting for the duration of that discussion, and also that whatever discussion generally takes place at the meeting, my assistant does not disclose that outside the church premises. And that's, I think, a very positive way of enabling me to participate as a valued member of our church and enable our church to continue with its business.
So finally, you've had church, you've enjoyed church, you're at home, and I'm just thinking in terms of church members, there are a lot of people suffering from various forms of disability in the community, and some of them are stuck inside their house 24 hours a day.
Sure.
Adventists are very good at visiting Sabbath afternoon. Rest of the week they're busy with their own lives. Is there a ministry there that's maybe important where church members can do things that can go the second mile beyond things that personal assistants, that carers are able to do?
Well, certainly I think this church is very blessed with material, especially audio-visual material, and hopefully this session that we're doing now. But it's right to recognise that no matter what improvements and access improvements we make to a church, some people physically won't be able to leave their homes for whatever reasons. And it's vitally important to be able to visit them in their homes, perhaps take a laptop or take some visual material, whether that's leaflets and books. Someone's able to read to that individual if they struggle to hold a book. If for whatever reason a DVD might not be appropriate. But we really have substantial resources. I mean, we have audio Bibles. It's endless. And I think if churches are thinking, well, how do we get to know about these people? How do we get to meet them? I think you have to look at your local charities. Look at the local disability groups. Contact your social services, contact residential and nursing homes, and don't always take no for an answer, because some people might feel they're imposing on other people's time and values. Make it quite clear that you want to be able to visit people in their homes and bring the word of our Lord to them, and this can be such a blessing to many individuals.
Richard Shaw, thank you for sharing your skills with us this afternoon.
Pleasure.